Righty then, so let's have a look at what they're kind of doing for this first world patch. So this is the first patch the world would be played on. Yeah, so okay. Given the Renekton Jasonness. Okay, so let's have a look. Hey, how's it going, Sean? So in terms of the changes, so system buffs. So we have let me just move. Let me just open this new tab. Oh, why is it so zoomed in? So let's move webcam. Oops. So let's move these up here for a second. Right, so world's patch, let's have a look. So the first big thing we've got is Predator buffs, so the ramp up time is good. Now, honestly, I think this buff is quite nice. And the max move speed's also to 60%. Honestly, one of the things I think this is actually going to buff massively, though, is Omni Stone, because you get Predator when you're not around anybody. So having it give more movement speed and more ramp up time means that if you actually do roll that Pred, I think it's very, very good. Overall, I think it is nice, but most of the champions that really take Predator, I mean, you've got things like Galio mid that can go Predator, but it's not really always what he wants, especially because the problem with Predator is the domination tree is just kind of not as good. Sorcery tree just has so much damage in it right now that it's usually the better option. If you can go for sorcery over domination, so in general, I don't think this is going to see Predator have a massive rise of play. I mean, maybe in comp, considering this is a comp buff, potentially, but overall, it's nice, but I don't think it's going to really change anything. Umbral Glaive, cheaper. This is obviously great for support. A little bit less lethality, though, which isn't great, but 2 lethality loss for 200 gold. That's fine. AD is only worth 35 gold each, so 2 lethality. This is definitely a buff. And the champions like Pyke, that really like this Umbral Glaive, I think it's very big for him. Now the problem is I don't think many of the champions really like Umbral Glaive as much, or use the lethality that it gives. So I don't think it's as good all around, but again, maybe this will see more supports take it just for that ward clearing ability. But the thing is, most of the supports that roam about are either kind of enchanters that want to just roam because they have an Ezreal lane or something, or like tanks that just want to roam anyway, like Leon and stuff like that. So they're not going to take on Umbral Glaive, which means the item in general I don't think is going to see much more play. Aphelios base AD 57 and 55. Now this is actually quite substantial, so this takes about 70 gold away from him just on base, so nearly a third of a kill removed in this base AD. Now this is a lot. Do I think this is going to make Aphelios less played? Not at all. I think Aphelios is one of the hardest scaling ADs in the game. Besides, you have things like Jinx, that's very good too. Kog'Maw as well, but Aphelios definitely fills that kind of niche of we want a really big team fighter to play in. So I think overall, that's not really going to change that much. The champion's still going to be bonkers. Ashe WCD 14-4, 18-4. Now this is actually going to very much harm early laning phase. Now we are just kind of talking about comp in this kind of patch though, and I think overall in comp this isn't really going to stop her being played. This is just going to put her in a position where she's not as potent in laning phase. Most of the time when you go Ashe, you're going Ashe against kind of shorter range carries, like things like Kai'Sa, Samira. I mean, Samira is actually not too bad because, she can get rid of your ult. But overall, these short range ADCs, Ashe is just very good into them. And she can do a lot. There's not many people that can match Ashe's range. Senna, Aphelios, like they can, but overall, most of the champs that are going to be seen, like the Xayah, and even if we look in the thing, like even things like Jinx, they get outranged by Ashe, so she gets a lot of freedom in the lane just through auto attacks. So I do think this is going to damage her a little bit, but I don't think it's going to do as much to comp, to be honest, even though it is definitely a substantial upgrade. Now, another thing to take note with this as well is your W is your first maxed ability. So this is only really going to harm Ashe pre level 9, because at level 9 it's the same cooldown of 4 seconds anyway. So pre 9 it'll harm her, but the longer she gets into the laning phase, the easier it will be to just completely negate this buff. Now, Camille, passive CD 16, 13, 10, 20, 15, 10. I mean, that's pretty big. Now, I think Camille is already quite a hyper-unique champion in the fact that she has the ability to play strong side, she has the ability to play weak side, she has a very good ultimate for kind of locking people down. So I think overall this Camille nerf is obviously pretty big, but she's still way too broken, especially if the Camille start going with things like Trinity Force, because Trinity Force actually amplifies the true damage that you get on your second Q. So if anything, in a lot of situations, Trinity Force actually works better than what the Shred from Sundra actually gives, purely because Sundra needs multiple items to get that armor shred, whereas Trinity doesn't with Camille specifically. So if they wanted to nerf Camille, it would probably have to be more towards the true damage conversion on her Q, because that's kind of what makes her so good. The fact that she's very safe in lane, and then later into the game she just has to get that empowered Q, and she basically one-shot ADCs because you can't build resistances against it due to it being true damage. The other thing you can really do is build HP, but building HP on ADCs is very, very difficult to do. And you know, some ADCs like Twitch can go something like a Titanic Hydra, and that can be really good into the Camille, since true damage, you know, you counter that with HP. But overall, I don't think that's going to change too much. Jace basically down by 2, again 70 gold just taken off his kit, which is quite a lot considering he's a lane bully. So I do think this is actually going to affect him a little bit. Now the thing with Jace is the fact that due to the fact that he plays in top lane, he can harass so many different champions, and his burst damage is very big, and he also scales kind of okay into the mid game. So this, I feel like, is going to tone him down a bit early, but good Jaces aren't going to feel this anywhere near as much. Kalista and knockup duration 1.5 to 2 to 1 to 2. Okay, so when you're playing Kalista, you're not really playing her for the knockup. I think one of the things that they're trying to do here is they're trying to remove like damage from her kit or CC from her kit, because she's primarily a damage dealer, and she deals damage very well in the right situation and if you play around her as well, especially with things like J4 being heavily meta right now. You can play something like Camille, and you can, you know, not Camille, sorry, Kalista. You can set it up with, say, an Alistar or a Leona, throw them in to a J4 ultimate, knock them all up, CC them, and just do so much. So I think Kalista is already one of them champions that you have to be extremely good on her, but she's very good in solo queue, in competitive, sorry. Now, Lee Sin nerfs base AD 7068. Now, I think Lee Sin has been in a good position for quite a while. I even discussed this with one of my previous junglers who was a Lee Sin player, and I argued even back then that I thought that Lee Sin was in a very, very good spot, because the thing is with champions like Lee Sin and Jarvan and Xin Zhao is they excel when they're in a meta, when they can be picked, and they're not going to be against a champion that is going to be able to contest at early pressure. So when you've got things like Lee Sin into champions like Diana, even things like Viego to some degree, and they want to look to farm a lot, and you want to look to just get pressure. So you can farm, don't get me wrong, if you don't have lanes to prioritize early, but I think in general Lee Sin did need a little bit of a nerf, since the meta has kind of favoured his playstyle for quite a while, and he's kind of good in the mid to late game too, because his ult is very good for peel, especially if you're into tanks. When we see things like Ornn being so heavily meta right now, if you're playing Lee Sin into an Ornn, you can literally just kick him into the enemy team, and you don't really need to put yourself in any danger whatsoever. You can just play around that, which is another reason why Lee Sin's very good into the late game. Same reason as Xin Zhao being good, because he can use ult and kind of avoid having to deal with any ranged opponents. Reactive W empowered stun duration 1.5 to 1. Animation time is also reduced. So that's terrible. That's really bad. So this is a huge nerf to this champion, because the thing with Renekton is your playstyle is that you kind of jump in, you get your full combo off during your stun, and then you use E to jump back out, and it's very hard to actually trade back. So if you understand trade patterns and you know how to kind of play around them, then that makes Renekton a very, very good pick. So in general, this is going to be huge to him. Do I think this is going to stop him being played? No, because Renekton is there to be a lane bully and pressure the early game. And, I mean, one thing that I don't think people use as much is the fact that Renekton's still point-and-click CC. It's basically an empowered auto-attack. So, what you can do is you can put junglers with him like Talia and Nidalee and all of these kind of really strong junglers. A bit of a fit. So, like I was saying, you have these kind of early game junglers that, you know, Nidalee's spear is very difficult to land unless you've got Renekton or a TF or a Ryze to, you know, get that initial CC off. Which is, again, one of the reasons why these champions are so good. Thresh, base movement speed, 335 to 330. Okay, that's going to damage him a little bit because obviously his runtime is, especially if you can't afford to get Mobies because you don't manage to back on enough gold, then this could be a really big nerf to him. Max bonus magic damage 100 to 200%, 1 per soul, down to 80 to 200%, 1.5 per soul. So the scaling is better, so the more souls you get, so the more proactive you are on the map, the better it is. But in the early, this is a big problem. Now, the problem with Thresh that Riot just don't do, and they just don't really... oops, so my webcam is frozen. There we go. So one of the big problems that you kind of get with Thresh is that his W is just way too powerful. So unless they actually hit his W, like I'm talking give it substantial amount of cooldown, and then I think Thresh will always be a staple pick in pro play. Because the power of that Lantern, being able to get somebody out in laning phase, it can deny ganks, it can, you know, get somebody out of a sticky situation when they miss position. And one of the most important things that people don't really realize with the Thresh Lantern is you can also kind of use it in the draft to not really give away anything about your draft. Now, this can work on blue side if you want to B1 Thresh. Say you've got rid of all the really priority picks, like you get rid of the Viego Jace, LeBlanc, Lee Sin, Zinzal. Say, for example, you manage to get rid of a lot of the tier 1 champion pools right now. Then what you end up doing is you can then go to things like the Thresh, which I think is on the verge of being a tier 1 champion anyway, due to, like I said, the amount of value he gives. Now, on top of that, you've also got the fact that it's, say, for example, your red side and you draft Thresh. You can then also on R2 draft a ridiculously strong hyper carry ADC and not really worry about having to play around them. So you can do this with things like Jinx especially, I think it's great with, where you can draft, say, Thresh Jinx in the first 2. Jinx is going to be great in team fights always because she's Jinx. And then what you can do is you can wait for them to reveal 2 of their picks, know that you've got 3 picks of theirs exposed, and then decide on your R3 what you want to do. Do you want to just counter a lane that they've already chosen? Do you want to, you know, look to change up where you're going for? Maybe you have Thresh Jinx with the intention of going something like a J4 and Psy on top and focusing bot, or alternatively you can just say, okay, well, Jinx has got Thresh, she's going to scale, she's still going to be strong, we just need to make sure we ward so that she doesn't get dove, and all of a sudden then we can focus top with something like that Renekton and a Nidalee, for example. And then later into the game, Nidalee lands a good spear, Jinx gets a good ult, and you can basically 100-0 somebody with just those 2 champ combinations if they don't fall behind. So yeah, I think overall Thresh will not ever be not seen in pro play unless this kind of this Lantern gets just nerfed, like, off the face. So then we got Trundle support. Now, one of the reasons why Trundle support is so good is because obviously you steal a lot of AD and a lot of resistances. So say, for example, if you're playing into something like a Leona, if she manages to get on top of your ADC and she's got her Aftershock and her W on, then what you can do is you can ult her as Trundle. And like Leona's big thing is that she's so tanky when she jumps in, and she does quite a lot of damage too. So if you then take away those stats as Trundle, then as the Trundle you become ridiculously powerful. Now, they haven't hit the ultimate in this patch, and they've only hit the E-slow. So this, you know, it still means that he's viable in bot lane, in my opinion. I don't think this is a killer change. I mean, the E-slow, you know, it gives a bit less when you max it, but the thing is, you're not really looking to max your E as much into like these matchups either, because, you know, if you put a few points into Q, then you can just kind of one hit their enemy ADC, and you just play like a massive kind of bruiser in the bot lane, and you can just shut down so many things. Now, obviously, the E-slow is pretty big, and I do think that this E-slow is probably going to impact jungle more than support, because when it comes to jungle and Trundle, your goal is to basically run into lane, get that E down, and then, you know, play around that. But yeah, it's going to be strong. But overall, I don't think this is going to really force him out of support, especially while these big tanks actually exist. So yeah. So next we have Varus. So his 1 second. Give me just a moment. Okay. Okay, so U.GG is completely screwed. That's unlucky. So I wanted to see. So this is the thing as well. So this is the thing I wanted to see as well. So a lot of people are actually prioritizing Locket first on Trundle, but the thing is, as Trundle support. But the thing is, you don't really get any mythical bonus off it until you've actually built one item. So I think the meta, even though people aren't really picking it up as much, is to rush your boots into Anathemas and then into Locket. So people aren't really doing that as much, which I wanted to see. But yeah. So I mean, this is again, it's going to affect him later on in this game, but his laning phase is going to stay pretty staple to what it would anyway, especially considering you don't max E until second, or after multiple points in Q anyway. So Varus now, P non-champ attack speed 20%. To 10 to 20% by base AD. Okay, so base AD down. So again, another 70 gold gone. So this is kind of this. I don't really like when they just attack base stats, because I feel like champions change based on meta, and if you attack base stats, it's kind of like it's like an easy way to attack those champions without really dealing with what's making them too strong. So I think it's a little bit of a cop out nerf, but it's passive. Giving less, so giving half at level 1 is pretty huge. Now again, this is going to really affect on hit more than lethality, but overall it's still pretty big. That's still a pretty big nerf. Even the base AD nerf is big, never mind this. So I think even like Varus will still get played, because again, Varus, you don't really play him because he's this massive damage dealer. He can do a lot of damage, but you play him because he is a good utility ADC, and you can use your ultimate very, very effectively in team fights. And this is why he's very good. He's very good because he has that kind of utility ultimate, which makes him great. Now we get into the fun stuff, the buffs. So these are the things that are probably going to make solo queue, like you said, Annabelle, completely painful to play, because a lot of these champions are good in solo queue, but you know, their comp abilities make them, yeah, it's a big thing. But so Mundo, Q max damage to monsters, this is crazy. So 300, 500, 350 to 650. The fact that they even feel the need to buff any sort of damage that Mundo is going to be doing to monsters, it's crazy to me. Mundo has an extremely fast clear, especially since it changes. So I don't know. I think that this is not really needed. But let's see what else. So our heal heals 20% missing HP, gains. Okay. So it's worse early, but it's better late. Max HP healing. Okay. So, okay. I already think he's great. I already think Mundo is a very good pick. I think that his ult is just, it's nowhere near as good anymore, because, it just doesn't really give as much anymore. But I think he's already great, especially in the jungle. I already think he's very, very good. In top lane, I think he isn't as good due to the fact that you have so many things to deal with, and tanks. Like if you play like Mundo top and you get placed into like a Camille matchup, then it's probably going to be it is going to be very, very painful for you. So I don't know how I feel about this. I think he's going to be even better in jungle, and I think this is more of a nudge to get people to play him in jungle. I don't think it's going to be like too huge, but again, I think he's already pretty good. So even the smallest nerf puts him into them kind of higher levels. It's the smallest buff, puts him in them kind of higher levels. Now Draven are hits on enemy champions that would leave their current HP below Draven's current League of Draven stats will execute them. Wait, are hits on enemy champion that would leave their current HP below Draven's... Nah, this can't be right. This cannot be right. Surely? How is this being allowed to be added into the game? Like, what? So, hold on, I need a minute. So, Draven is already, he's one of them champions who's kind of like Lucian. If you don't do damage, you don't do anything. So if you aren't mechanically good enough to get ahead on them consistently, because you're just better than the enemy, then it becomes very, very hard. Now, yeah, overall, I don't know, that's just weird. I don't know. This is just a very odd kind of buff to make. Execute them. If I see Draven players going Collector after this change, I swear to God. But this is crazy. This is a huge buff. And the fact that they're buffing Draven for competitive focus, I don't really think there's many players that even play Draven at a professional level. You've got things like Freeze, but he's not world, so... I don't know. So GP, so this is a buff as well after the changes to his barrels. Oh no, as in pro players that are actually at Worlds. So base HP 540 to 570 now. That's big. That's a lot of base HP, especially early on into the game. That's a big buff. Like early into the game, like 1 or 2 extra damage can be huge. This is why things like a Mumu is kind of becoming ridiculously good as a support, because that damage reduction along with steel caps is significant. It's huge. So I think this is massive. This is going to give him a lot more skirmisher power, and the HP per level is up by 8 per level as well, so that's another 8 damage that you can take for free. So I actually think this is going to make his early laning phase really, really a lot easier to kind of deal with. Now, obviously the changes came recently. I think GP is one of the strongest champs in the game if played properly. He's just very, very difficult. The team fighting power that he actually provides is huge. But yeah. So I think that's quite a big buff. Now, Jinx buff, Q mana cost 20 to 16 to 20. Okay, so the Q is getting buffed early. Now, the thing is with this is the Q is your first max ability because of the amount of attack speed it gives. So this is a buff to your, level 1 to 9. So this is an early game buff towards her. But the cost being lower is, great. It's basically your main way of trading in lane. I already think Jinx is one of the best ADCs in the game right now, to be honest. I think she's very good, especially in teamfight comps, especially if you make comps around singling out one person. Like, for example, right now you have a lot of LeBlanc popping off. So one of the main kind of counters that you can take to LeBlanc is something like Lissandra. Now, the thing with Lissandra is she can use her ult to just kind of isolate one person so Jinx can kill them, get a reset, and then take over the entire comp. So I think we'll potentially see more of things like the Liss. with the Jinx paired, because I actually think it's a very good combo that is very underused. But, you know, Jinx is just going to be able to get a little bit more harass early game, which could potentially result in some more early game kills as well. So we'll see. I think this is a pretty nice buff though. It's not too much, but I think it will be enough to push her into a lot of play. So Kai'Sa E cooldown 16 to 12. So late game, she's getting a little bit of a buff. I mean, she's already good late game, so it's kind of like they're just doubling down on where she's really good. I'm making her E. Now, obviously, late game, this 2 seconds is quite substantial because it's also her invisibility. So I think when you've got invisibility, this is going to be pretty big for late game, so it's very, very good. Now, Karma buffs, what's crazy? Karma's a champion right now that abuses items so hard it's unreal. Like, even after the Staff of Flowing Water changes, like stuff like that, she's still very good. Especially with like the Shurelya's too. Moonstone, I think, is a little bit underrated right now. I think Moonstone's actually very good. In certain situations, like say for example if you're getting outranged massively, then Moonstone is very, very good because you can just keep healing, shielding, and you'll keep proccing that Moonstone on them from the kind of back. So it makes Karma a little bit more of an enchanter, but that's, I mean, more of a enchanter rather than damage dealer later on into the game. But overall, I think this is armor 26-28. So this is basically better for her in bot lane, I think, where this armor is going to be an indicator constantly. In terms of kind of mid lane, if she is in somebody like Lucian, okay, then great. Like it's going to help her a little bit, but Lucian's still massive lane belly. So I mean, they're still giving her an extra 40 gold for free in base stats, which again, attacking base stats or buffing base stats is an easy way to give something power. E-shield 80 to 260, 90 to 270. Okay, so that's fine too. I mean, it's definitely, it will help, especially in the early laning phase where you can potentially proc it multiple times, and you know, in later game where you proc it multiple times, but you know, later game there's a lot more damage, and that 10 isn't really going to do all that much. I think more so this is to just make it so that they can give her a little bit more early, and then make it so that the scaling isn't a little bit scuffed, so that, you know, you're not losing gold from putting points in E at any point. But yeah, Kog'Maw buff, crazy. Kog'Maw is amazing in my opinion. I love Kog'Maw. I think he's a very underrated champion, and I think with the right support he's very good. Now, one of the problems with Kog'Maw is a lot of the time people think, oh, you know, Kog'Maw can only be played with something like Lulu, which is a fair point, but Kog'Maw has so much early lane pressure and damage, especially with his range and, again, max HP in his W, that he doesn't really need Lulu. Lulu is good when there's, say, assassins that can jump on him late game and she can, you know, heal and shield him. But in the laning phase, Kog'Maw really just wants somebody that can make space for him and kind of jump on them, do damage. So things like Leona with a Kog'Maw is extremely good. It's crazy good. It's an insane 2v2 bot lane. But people just don't really run it as much because they don't know exactly how Kog'Maw works, and they haven't really played him enough to know his strengths. So, you know, that's a really big thing to Kog. But this buff, he doesn't need it, but I mean, why not, I guess. So the EAP ratio, 50%, 70%. Okay, so actually I should have read this first, because maybe this is actually a little bit of a buff. So this is actually a buff towards mid lane Kog'Maw, AP Kog'Maw, because when you're playing bot lane Kog'Maw, you don't actually take your E, you just cycle points through your Q and W, because your E doesn't really do that much, and your Q and W provides so much more. So you don't really take your E until you have to. So this actually affects more AP Kog'Maw mid, so we haven't really seen that in a long time, but it can be kind of good to deal with things, you know, that are very long range. But obviously it still has very clear weaknesses in the fact that AP Kog'Maw mid has a lot of range, but if it ever gets caught or flanked, then he's dead. So if a team prioritizes, say, early heralds and pops tier 1 mid open, then all of a sudden Kog'Maw can't really stay mid safely without a ton of vision. So if your jungler or support just completely clear out vision from one side of that kind of lane, then he can never really walk up past tier 2, which means he can never really get priority. So I think this is kind of one of the blatant, obviously, issues with Kog'Maw mid. Like, obviously, if they pick, like, an Azir, you have a lot of range. You can actually skirmish with them a bit, but as soon as you get that shuffle, one good shuffle, and you're potentially dead. So, this is kind of the thing to Kog'Maw, but again, I think he should be played way more in bot lane. Misfortune R weighs 12, 16 to 14 to 18, so this is just an all-round buff. So 2 extra waves at all stages of the game. It's just very nice. It's just very, very good. There's a lot of times where as MF, you just don't quite kill them. And another thing with this addition to the waves is that you don't have to be as precise with it. So what I mean by this is sometimes you'll have just enough damage to kill them with your ult, but you have to be very precise with it to actually land them, and you have to kind of position yourself so you get a little bit closer so that they can get away. Now the thing with the MF ult is obviously it's like this, and it spreads out towards this side. Now the thing with this is if you're a champion stud directly here, or let's say a little bit further in. So say if you're a champion stud here, one of the safest ways you can actually go to get away from this, kind of the same way as Aatrox W, is to actually go to the side like this. Now, because of this, as an MF, what you want to do is you want to get in range where they can't jump on you. So say if you've got like a melee that can't jump on you, let's say Darius has used his E, you can get to say here and then ult, and if you're going to kill him and you've got enough peel that he can't just walk into you and kill you, then he can only really walk this way, which means he walks through your waves. So 2 extra waves in this situation could be the difference between you actually killing somebody and not, and it can be very, very good. Again, it's just all-round damage as well. It's just straight damage, which you can't really go wrong when MF is a massive damage dealer, especially at level 6, since her laning phase is so strong that once you do get that level 6, it's very good for just jumping in. So yeah, I do think this is quite a nice change, but overall, I don't know if we'll see much MF, because people don't realize the advantages to MF. Like, for example, if we're playing MF and we for example, in draft, and we pick MF, and then all of a sudden they pick 5 short range champions. They got like a Kai'Sa, things like Olaf, stuff like that, like really short range champions or melee champions. Then we could potentially go on hit in that situation, but we can also go poke MF if they end up having long range. So MF is kind of very versatile in the fact that she can change her how she wants to play in her build path based on and runes as well. She can go like Comet or PTA, and based on the overall way that she wants to play. So I think the MF is really good because of that. So just adding more damage on her, it's just very nice in general, you know. So Morgana, ECD, 26 to 18, 24 to 16. Now E isn't something you max first, so this is going to impact her mid game. So this is going to be a little bit of a mid-game buff to her. I mean, it's 2 seconds less in lane, which when it is a 20-second cooldown, 26-second cooldown, it helps a lot, you know, and it's 2 seconds all around, so it's nice. Yeah, it won't really change much about Morgana and solo queue, but yeah, in competitive, this could be the difference between when they choose to trade, if they want to trade around a cannon. There's sometimes in competitive that a cannon will come and Morgana won't have her E up in order to fight around it, since it just has a very favourable trade, for example. So this might actually give the opportunity to just do it a little bit earlier. So this is good. Now this is where the ridiculously spicy, like, oh, these buffs are so painful. So Singed, the R causes all damage to apply Grievous Wounds. I think from what I've seen from the devs, this is only 40% Grievous Wounds. So 40% is still huge, but what this means is this isn't necessarily going to mean that, Singed, is going to really change his build path as much. What this does mean is he doesn't need to itemize into Grievous Wounds anymore, because it's not really worth it for him. So what he can do now, so Singed Ultimate actually gives him ridiculous amounts of free stats. Like, his ultimate free stats is a crazy amount. Now the thing behind this is obviously you want to go with specific items. There's a lot of items that Singed want. You've got things like Riftmaker, Rylai's, you can even go things like Leandries, There's a lot of different things that Singe wants. I mean, Rabadon's if you're stupidly ahead. I mean, Zonya's can be good in some situations. Like, there's lots of things that you want on Singed, but Grievous Wounds is not one of them. Because you basically just want to be a nuisance as much as possible. So Grievous Wounds isn't really something you want to be itemizing into. So this now just allows him to not need to itemize into it. So the buffs are actually nice. It's a very nice quality of life change to Singed, in my opinion. Now, this one is the craziest one. Now, this is insane. A clears Grievous Wounds from target. Now, this is crazy. Now, Soraka is an insane champion. She is very, very strong. Now, the problem with Soraka is it's like, if your team are ahead, then amazing, because you just sit there and kind of shield and heal. And that's great for you. Now, if your team is behind, then she's also great because it doesn't really matter too much. So let's say in a team fight, we've got 5 members of the team and they all deal 1,000 damage. So these are all just theoretical. So say this team, so 5 members do 1,000 damage. Okay, amazing. Now say your 5 members are only doing 750 damage. You know, that's nowhere near as much. That's a substantial amount of damage. We're losing 250. Likely it is. Well, I mean, we will lose that team fight eventually unless we can use our CC. But let's say we're in a world where we don't have that CC. Now, what ends up happening is when you add Soraka into that mix, is this 1,000 damage that they're doing. Say you heal 500 damage with your ultimate, your Ws. Say you heal 500 damage, all of a sudden this team fight, instead of doing the 1,000 damage, they're only doing 500, which now this 750 damage means that you're actually doing more. So it's more of a case of if you play Soraka properly, the damage just doesn't stick. Now on top of this, which makes it even more disgusting, and if you want to see examples of this, I have a skill cap video on their commentaries channel of Soraka. You can actually, I mean, I'm not saying this is the most optimal, but you can actually rush Warmog's first item with a Kindle Gem, which you're going to turn into either a Shurelia's or a Moonstone anyway, and then all of a sudden you have enough HP to proc the Warmog's Heart passive constantly. So you're repeatedly above 1100 HP, so you're constantly healing back up to that max. So it means that you no longer even need to be in a dangerous position to land your Q, since it's just not really needed. So instead of landing your Q, you can literally just sit back with Warmogs and just keep healing with W over and over and over, and it's ridiculous. It's very oppressive and very hard to play into. So on top of this now, her R causes her R will just clear Grievous Wounds, which is insane. Now, this isn't as strong as it seems on paper, because Grievous Wounds can very easily be reapplied again. The times this is going to help is after a big team fight, when, you know, people are burning and people are getting low, or mid-team fight when, you know, like somebody's Grievous Wound, and say, for example, you have a Silas, who, again, in competitive is one of the strongest mid laners right now. You end up in this kind of position where, to counter a Silas, you would build Grievous Wounds, and when he goes to use his W, you use Grievous Wounds against him. Now, if you've got Soraka, what you can do is, as soon as he feels those Grievous Wounds applied, Soraka can time in comms when she's going to use her ultimate around when Silas wants to use that W. So Silas can call to use it just before he Ws. It's going to clear Grievous Wounds, make his W go off, and all of a sudden he's never going to die. So I think this is, at a solo queue level, not the biggest thing, again, because they can just reapply those Grievous Wounds, and it's not really going to do much. Soraka's ult is on a substantial cooldown as well, so it's not even like she can spam it. But in general, yeah, it's just going to mean that in competitive, when you have communication, this is going to be ridiculously powerful, and this is going to be one of the standout kind of changes, considering Soraka is already insane. So, yeah, now Talia, which is a champion that I previously mentioned as well, in the fact that if you pair her with something like a Renekton, she's very, very good. Now, the thing with this, let's see what they're actually doing to her before we have another Kog'Maw situation where I say the complete wrong thing. So QCAS on workaround refund 50% of what? That's kind of big. That's kind of big, to be honest. Workaround radius 453. Oh, so this is huge. Because the thing with Talia is when you're taking, say, objectives or camps, you basically work as much of the ground as you possibly can. But the fact that this is now 150 lower in terms of radius means that now you can get more of your empowered Qs off. And it also means that a team fighting potential is going to be very, very big as well, which is great. Also, duration here. This is amazing too because it's been reduced by so much. So this 20 seconds is actually a reduction in terms of... So worked ground means that if you use your Q, it will throw out multiple rocks and do multiple damage. Now if you have, say if you're running Electrocute, this will mean that one Q can fully proc your Electrocute, which can be very, very good, even as lane Talia, which I think this could potentially buff her in lane too, because one of the problems in lane is that, you know, like the worked ground restricts her from actually trading a lot, which is why she was forced into jungle, and obviously she's quite squishy and she's a mobile as well. So this actually might see a return to mid lane, which could be very, very fun, and it's actually, now I think about it more, what I think they're actually looking to do, because QCAS and worked around, why would you really be looking to get that refund as much in the jungle actually? You'd be looking to use it more in laning phase. So I actually think this buff is a target at Talia in lane, specifically mid lane, because her ultimate allows her to get into side lanes, so she can be a very good response to things like Twisted Fate, who is very good right now, if she can lane against him properly, which is what I think they're potentially looking to do here. So I actually think this could be something that becomes very good, especially considering that's 20 seconds off that duration too, which means you're going to be able to use that empowered Q way more often. I say empowered, the base Q way more often before it gets debuffed. So yeah, so it's very, it's one of the things that's restricting her right now, and I think that Riot finally listened to the Talia mains that want to play a mid, and I think this is actually a really, really good buff. I think this could actually bring Talia back into the meta pretty nicely actually. So the R-AD ratio on Twitch, this is a complete joke, to be honest. Again, they've added a substantial amount. I mean, 10 AD on top is a lot, don't get me wrong. 10 AD is over a kill worth of gold. But Twitch's problem isn't the fact that his R doesn't have enough damage. It's more so there's just so much stuff to stop his R right now. His R can be blocked. Like, if you even consider taking Twitch in comp, they're just going to take something like Braum, or even like a Yasuo, and all of a sudden he just win walls you and you're just done for. So, like, Twitch's ult being blocked by pretty much everything, and the fact that, you know, the champion relies on being a bit cheesy to win, means that if he doesn't snowball, he's not going to do as much, and since they made him AP, this isn't going to do as much. I think this is a bit of a joke change, to be honest. But, I mean, it's still free gold, but I don't think it's going to see Twitch ever come to pro play. I just don't think he's in a position where he can. I just don't think it's going to happen. Urgot, QCD, 12, 8, 10 to 8, okay. So, QCD early is reduced. Now, the reason why this is quite good too is because on Urgot, your first max is going to be your W. So you're looking to max your W first anyway. So by, you know, doing this, it's going to affect him later on into the game. I can't see Urgot main swapping to Q second, to be honest. I think WE later on into the game. Well, W is the most important because obviously at level 9 it's fully unlocked, so you don't really get it anymore. I don't think there's any pros currently running Q second either. So I really think this is a bit of a joke buff. I think it's not really gonna. I mean, actually, now I think about it though. The fact that this isn't something you max to last actually does hold more weight towards the buff. I guess, since, you know, instead of the 12 throughout the majority of the game, it is only going to be 10. But, you know, I just don't really see it changing all that much about the champion, to be honest. I mean, I do think there is some situations where Urgot can be very good, especially into a lot of melees, but the problem is, if you are playing into an Urgot, the only thing you need to do is just not die early, and if you don't die early, he's just going to get kited to absolute oblivion later on into the game, especially since his E is so telegraphed with how he wants to use it. You can, you know, see the wind-up. Anybody can flash an Urgot E, or use Gale Force to get away from the E. Like, it's very, very easy to do. And again, since Gale Force exists, I don't think this is going to be anywhere near enough to push Urgot into professional play. I think maybe this might help solo queue a little bit more, but it's still going to be very niche when Urgot can be picked, I think, due to, again, the amount of kiting in the game now. It just makes it almost impossible to actually pilot this champion effectively in competitive play. So Yone buffs. I mean, so the mana cost buff is nice, but I just don't really think it's gonna change the identity of this champion. Like, I think that this change isn't gonna force him into comp compared to now, you know? I think now pushing him into comp is niche, but with this, it's still going to be just as niche. Like, it doesn't get rid of his problems, is what I'm trying to say. Like, doesn't get rid of any of the issues that he currently faces. Like, I don't know if there's many Urgot mains that, you know, their main issue is that they run out of mana in the laning phase. And, you know, this buff, like I said, you don't max Q until late, so this buff, I mean, it helps you early, don't get me wrong, since you don't max it, but overall, it's just not that impactful towards the issues that the champion has. Now Yone, W shielding per extra champion hit, like, why? I don't get. I get that they want Yone to be played at Worlds. I get that Yone is quite a difficult champion, and some of the champions in meta are a little bit rough for him, but overall Yone is an insane scaling champion, and this is just all round. So in team fights, this guy is going to be unkillable. Especially, you know, like, it means now he doesn't have to reactivate his E to go back as soon, which means he gets to do more damage within his E time, which is insanely strong. So, yeah, I don't know. Like, it's kind of crazy. I don't think he needed it. I think Yone is in a pretty good spot. I think he's very strong as kind of like an assassin. You get in, you do damage, you get out. That's simple. You chunk someone out, you get out. Like, even if you chunk someone, like, if you manage to land everything on your kit and you chunk them out, then you're already going to do a massive amount, you know? And then again, you can just leave people to come and just clean up and stuff like that. The more I think of this Urgot buff, though, the more I'm unsure of it. Either way, this, maybe Urgot does get big, and it's just something I'm overlooking. Urgot hasn't been seen in a long time, although he is great into melee champions, so maybe it does change something. Maybe I'll be wrong on that one, but we'll see. Now Yuumi, okay, so passive CD 18-6 to 14-6. Okay, now this is huge. That extra 4 seconds on the passive is crazy big. So this is gonna, you know, solve a lot of mana issues with Yuumi. It's gonna, you know, just allow it to be way more oppressive in the laning phase. And I think a good Yuumi here is just going to make the game miserable, especially when you've got these champions also getting buffed. Whenever you see a Yuumi buff, you also have to have a look at who else is getting buffed with her. So now I think about it: the Yone, the Urgot, the Twitch, Singed, Kog'Maw. Kog'Maw Yuumi is a great duo, to be honest, because it just allows a Kog'Maw to just 1v2 lane and, you know, Gangplank. So, I mean, you know, Gangplank's going to be insane. Dr. Mundo with a Yuumi on him, unkillable almost. So, you know, I think this is going to be huge. They don't specifically buff the I don't want to play against champions. The purpose of these world patches is that they're buffing champions that make the game interesting. You know? They're buffing the champions that are flashy that make the game interesting. They get them really big plays, like the Cogmore just shredding through an entire team. That's entertaining to watch. That's entertaining to watch. Cogmore just 1v5 shredding through their team is so fun. Gangplank getting multiple huge barrels, really fun. Like Dr. Mundo being unkillable, even though I don't think that's what the buffs will do to him. Again, very, very good. Like, all of these champions are just entertaining, and that's why they get a lot of buffs, in my opinion. They're champions that they want to see at Worlds. I'm surprised Azir hasn't got a buff here, to be honest. Like, champions like that. Actually, I think Azir got buffed recently. But yeah, Yuumi, you know, like, you put Yuumi on an Olaf, and that's hilarious. That's so fun to watch. You just watch the Olaf run through. Now, again, that's not going to be fun to play, but when Worlds is coming up, Riot's goal isn't to make the game fun to play. Riot's goal is to make the game entertaining so people will invest in the game. So it's like, this is why you see a lot of these buffs to champions that don't really need it. Like Singed didn't, like, I mean, he did need a buff for solo queue, but they've already specifically mentioned that this is comp focus. So it's kind of like they're saying, okay, well, this is a comp focus change, so we want to see Singed in comp, which I can't see it really happening, but, you know, maybe it does. So, you know, it's to just make things more entertaining, because at the end of the day, you have to remember that the Worlds is basically a way of Riot saying, this is everything we've done this year. We're going to put on a great big performance. We're going to get loads of people happy and interested in this entertainment. And then we're going to ride this through the first half of the year until MSI to just get as much funding, secure as much kind of B2B interest as we can, and just pop off that way. So that's why they're doing it. Obviously, this doesn't seem too fun in solo queue, where some of these champions in solo queue will just completely snowball the game. But like MF getting this buff in solo queue is going to be huge. Like, it's going to be huge, because more damage in solo queue is always great, especially if she gets ahead and snowballs. Now in comp, she's not really gonna snowball anywhere near as hard, and if she does, then somebody's really messed up. So yeah. Zed passive now deals 100 bonus damage against monsters. So they're really... See, this is... I feel like what Riot are trying to do with this change and what they're actually doing is completely different. And I'm very interested to know if they actually know Riot, or they consider if they're impacting other roles. Because the thing is here, passive now deals 100% bonus damage to monsters. I mean, like, the average person would read that and see, okay, well, passive now deals 100% bonus damage to monsters. I should play him jungle, like. But the thing is, I don't think this is going to impact Zed jungle anywhere near as much as Zed mid. Because the thing is with Zed mid is he's very, very heavy snowballing champion. So if you get at first few kills with Zed, you're going to one-shot your laner. And this happens all the time. You see this all the time in solo queue. Best Zed players will get an early kill, level 2 or level 3. And then from there, they'll get another kill at level 4. They'll get another kill at level 5. And on top of that, every kill that you get, 6 and pre-6, will actually give you 20% more XP. And then level 7 and level 8, you get 10% more XP. So these lane bullies, that their goal is to basically just blow someone up in lane when they get to level 2 or 3, they really, really benefit from this enhanced amount of XP. Now, 20% extra XP early is huge, and that's going to get you to 6 way faster. XP early game is incredibly important. So what this is going to mean is if Zed does manage to snowball and get a kill at level 2, and then level 3, level 4, level 5, you end up with a Zed with 3 or 4 kills before he even has his ultimate. So then what he does is, as soon as he walks into the lane, he's got those Dirks, he's got everything he needs, he's got 60,000 longswords, because his econ and his kind of back timings are very interesting. And then you end up in this position where he'll just walk in, ult the laner, one-shot him, and then just walk into the enemy jungle, either find the jungle and kill them, or just use this 100% bonus damage against monsters to just clear out the entire enemy jungle, and then get to a point where he's unkillable. Because what Zed can also do is, once he's got his core lethality items, maybe his Dustblade or whatever you go that game, and on top of that, maybe it's Serpent's I don't think Serpent's Fangs is good anymore because it doesn't give as much lethality. It's very cheap though, so maybe if you are looking for that 2-item spike as soon as possible, could be great, especially if they've got like a Karma or a Lulu. But then you also look for that kind of like you've got all your longswords, all your damage, and you're just gonna one-shot people. Like his back timings are great because you can come into lane, get a kill or push the wave, get a big fight, chunk them out, reset, just buy a longsword, and then come back into the lane and do it again. Like it's very, very difficult to deal with in the early laning phase, and this is where a lot of Zeds really get messed up in the fact that they don't realize that they only need 350 gold to reset. Like that's all they need, and it's pure AD as well, so you don't get anything else from a longsword. So it's great. Now Zoe ECD 2014, 16, and 12. Now I love Zoe Nidalee combo, and I've already mentioned that I still think Renekton is going to be played. So I mean Zoe also plays into that perfect. I remember on a previous team we had a phase where we ran exclusively Zoe Nidalee and things like Renekton because it was just very oppressive, because if you land one CC like the Renekton CC, that's going to go into a Zoe bubble, which is going to then result in a max range Zoe Q, which is then going to result in a max range Nidalee Q. They're going to die. Like if you single somebody out, they die. So it's very, very good, especially if you've got like even like a Leona or something with that as well. It's disgusting. You'll win team fights like indefinitely. Now having her ECD lower doesn't just mean that she gets more time to trade in lane. She can also abuse enemy jungler more. Like, so if, say, for example, she gets a ward on Raptors, she can much easier land that E and do a lot more there. So I think overall, this is a very, very substantial buff. 4 seconds less on, you don't max Q at E first, you max your Q. So because you're maxing Q first anyway, you're going to feel this CD buff very, very hard, especially since on Zoe you go Q, E, W. So this E change, sorry, is, you know, it's going to be great. Like, it's going to be very good. You're going to benefit from this throughout all stages of the game until you start maxing it, and then even when it's maxed, you're also going to benefit it. So even at level 13, you're still benefiting from this E-change. So I think this is just an all-round really good buff, and I actually really like Zoe. I think she's a good champion. Champion adjustments. Okay, so these are not buffs or nerfs, I presume. So Fizz, passive damage reduction increased to 8 plus 2% against champions' basic attacks. Okay. Okay, that's fine. W on hit damage 1030 to 2040. Okay. I mean, this is nice because your W is a lot of your trading power, because one of the things you do with Fizz is you take 1 or 2 trades, drop them to about 30%. You drop them to about 60% HP. And it doesn't even matter if you're like 30% because you'll just one-hit them as soon as you go in with your full combo. So this is kind of one of the things you look to do on Fizz a lot. So extra on-hit damage on your W, which you use with your Q. It's going to just mean that combo is just going to do more, which is really, really nice. The Agape damage, 150, 350, plus 80% HP. So 150 to 350. So they've reduced some of the AP ratio, and they haven't given base stats. So they've reduced base stats and AP ratio, which is just all-around nerf. One thing that you will actually see sometimes what they'll do is they'll say, nerf the AP ratio but buff the base ratio in order to give them a better early game, or vice versa, they'll nerf the base ratio and increase the AP ratio to give them a little bit of better scaling. So here they've done neither, which is kind of weird. Champa 225, 425, 100% AP to 200, 350 plus 85% AP. Oh wait, so this is what I literally just said. So they've actually increased base stats and reduced scaling. So this is a slightly early game buff for Fizz. You know, for example, level 6 to level 11 maybe. This is quite big, especially on that level 9 where you've got a max ability. It's pretty nice. Gigalodon 300, 500 plus 20% of HP to 250 to 400. Okay, so and then they've nerfed this. So a lot of changes. Obviously, Fizz's ult is very unique. I think he is going to have slightly more damage with it early, but I think late he's gonna feel this change, especially if he snowballs as well. I think this is actually Probably a little bit of a nerf to solo queue, maybe. And a little bit of a buff to comp. But we'll see. So Kiana, base attack speed 0.625 to 0.688. Again, base stats are always nice. Like as changes, base HP regen 1.8 to 1.5. Okay, so she's lost a bit of HP regen, which can be quite big. But again, like it can be quite big since it's Kiana. You're looking for trade patterns. So having less HP regen means that when you go for that second trade, you're going to have slightly less, which is pretty important. Q now deals 20. Okay, Q now deals 25% bonus damage to monsters. E damage 60 to 180, so E damage is reduced a little bit, which again, 10 damage is actually quite big considering you want as much damage as possible to go for those one shots, especially at level 4. But 25% bonus damage to monsters. I mean, it's going to help her to clear out camps, but her camps are she already takes them kind of slow. That's why Kiana jungle isn't as great anymore. But, I mean, overall, I still think she's very, very strong. And I don't think this attack speed even does anything really, because you're looking to just one-shot them with your entire combo. Maybe this allows for your combo to be slightly faster in terms of animations. But I still think she's going to be broken. I don't think this is going to change too much. Maybe a slight nerf, I'd say, because it's damage to monsters. Like, you don't really want to be hitting monsters. You want to be running around killing people. Maybe when you're taking red, you want it to be a little bit faster, but except for that, I don't think it's that big of a change. So Lilia base HP regen 1.5 to 0.5, regen growth 0.75 to 0.55. So base regen and growth is just been reduced by significant amounts, like significant, over half, like 75%. Wait, no, but like this is big, very big actually. So passive large monster healing, now this needs to be much higher. So 1894 28. Okay, so 18 to 28. That's not bad. That's not bad. Q passive duration 5.5 seconds to 6.5 seconds. So okay, and ECD 18 to 16. Okay, so this is nice. I think this is removing a lot of her inbuilt kind of sustain, and just meaning that you now actually have to think about these things a little bit more, about your healing specifically. But I don't mind this change. I don't mind this adjustment, should I say. So Rumble passive attack speed 20 to 80% based on levels. So okay, this is impacting early significantly. 30% loss early is huge, but it's also a 30% increased late based on level. So if you did want to play Rumble like more of a farming jungler, or Rumble mid actually, might benefit quite a lot from this, more so than jungle, because you get enhanced XP. So you're going to get to this break point where I'm curious to see at what point you get to 50%, or what level, because that's very important. Because if you get to 50% at like level 9, then this isn't really it's still pretty big, but it's not as detrimental. But if you're not getting to 50% until like level like 12, 13, then so I'm curious to see the distribution of this. But this is a big adjustment, should I say. WCD 7.6 to 6. So actually, I think the reason this was 7 to 6 originally is so that you couldn't overheat. So I think I'd have to test it, but I think this now means that you can potentially abuse the overheat mechanic again on your W. So this could actually be a significant buff, to be honest. Like, he's going to be a little weaker early game because losing 30%, but even in jungle, like, you can potentially get like big buffs. I think this could actually be a really good change. So Talon, Q, base damage 65. Firstly, why are they changing Talon? Doesn't really make much sense. Q base damage 65 to 165, from 65 to 145. I don't think this changes much, because this is at max anyway, which on Talon I think you go W first, right? You max your W out. Yeah, so you max your W first on Talon anyway. So this, you're not going to see... Oh wait, this is a nerf actually. Sorry, it's 165 to 145. Doesn't really matter. This doesn't really change anything because you're not really going to see this damage reduction until like level 12, 13. So it's just pointless. W now deals 50% bonus damage against monsters. So what they're trying to do is potentially put him into the jungle, which Talon jungle has been a thing before, but I really don't think Talon jungle is viable. Like, I just don't think it's very good whatsoever. I think it's just a bad pick all around, to be honest. So again, I don't think this is too good. So this is a patch rundown. Is there anything more to it? No, I don't think so. As you said, anyway. The thing that I'm not seeing though is there's no changes to itemization in ADC, like Shield Wall, Wit's End, stuff like that. I just don't really see much of it. Changing the Jace nerf reverted to AD. Okay, so the Jace nerf actually got changed, so Jace no longer got nerfed. So that 2 AD was actually pretty big, I guess. I mean, it is 70 gold, so now passive duration 125 to 0.5, okay. Yeah, so like I said with base stats is when you do nerf base stats too much, it's across the board nerf. Like, it's not a case of you're nerfing the people that are maxing out the champion, you're also hurting the people that are trying to learn the champion and play them because they find them fun. So okay, so this is nice. I can't see anything else. Okay, so so more context on Dr. Mono and Soraka buffs. So Soraka Wish heal one. I want more context on the Rumble changes, to be honest. Again, so she didn't get a heal nerfed at all. Oh yeah, she did. Sorry, she did get it nerfed by a little bit. It's not really too big though, to be honest. So 20% missing HP. This was just really bad. But bonus HP, you know, that's kind of nice because he just becomes more tanky, and on top of that, his items are also going to do more. Like if you go Titanic, you're also going to be doing more with this ult, which could potentially be an angle for him. Like Titanic Rush, maybe good. Heals of max HP over 10 seconds. Okay, so it's just healing less of his max HP over 10 seconds, but you know, it's fine. So overall, I think the world's buffs are, you know, not too bad. Like I don't mind these, to be honest. Like I don't think there is some things that are very shitty for solo queue. Like we're gonna see a lot of Dravens. There's gonna be a lot more Sorakas, maybe Talia mids. There's going to be champions that are already good that people just aren't playing right now. A lot more Jinx. Jinx is very good. Even things like Jinx Yumi, great. Yumi synergizes with loads of champions here. In general, I think this is the first patch towards Worlds. So we'll see what they do after this. Again, they do have a few other things they can change. Actually, Sin's already mentioned. Wit's End, Gold Drinker, Sterex, and Divine Syndra. Left again. Like, oh, okay. He's having a bit of a moment, but I think overall buffs are quite nice, and they're definitely bringing back some of the more interesting champions. Like me personally, I'd love to see a Singed in Pro. I mean, it's not going to happen, but I'd love to see Singed. I'd love to see Cog more Jinx. I'd love to see. I mean, Gangplank's play quite a lot now, but I'd love to see more. I mean, I would like to see a Draven in Pro, to be honest, even though it's probably going to be very scuffed unless it's a Korean player that's, you know, nuts on Draven. But you know, I think other things like MF I think is very good. This buff is just gonna make people aware of how good she is, because the thing is with these buffs too, you have to realize that people are gonna get these champions and they're gonna go, oh, this champion's buffs, I should play her, and then they're gonna be playing MF and they're gonna be landing Qs and they're gonna be like, wow, this Q feels so good, when they haven't even changed anything to Q. So then what's going to end up happening is people are going to play it more, and then it's going to be like, oh, well, this champion's actually very good even without these buffs. And then they'll usually get nerfed, but you've already got more people playing that champion then, so it's already a win. So, yeah, I think that's it for that. So, yeah, I'll stop this now and then upload it to YouTube.